Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you enjoy what you're listening to, if you could click subscribe on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to, if you could also go and rate us, it helps us spread the word of the Advancement Podcast. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, click subscribe or like. That way you get our content every Tuesday and Thursday. My name is Todd. I'm the host of the Advancement Podcast, here with the lead consultant of Advancement, Timothy Dominic Ware. Tim, you doing good today, man?
Well, I'm inside right now. The heat's outside, and I won't be out in it for a little bit, so I'm doing all right.
105 yesterday.
Felt like 113, and there was no wind. It was hot.
Awful.
It's hot outside.
I was outside at our land yesterday, so I was living the farm life as much as I could live. I caught a fish yesterday, so.
You guys, y'all have some property with your family where y'all go hunting.
Yes, and we have cows. We have cows too. To get that ag exemption.
Yes, there will go. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'm not sure I quite call it farm life or ranch life.
Ranch life. Well, it's fine. Whatever.
It's not quite. I mean,
it's not the city life.
I'm wondering, did he catch a fish out of a pond or did he go get a fish out of the freezer?
Oh, yeah, baby, come on.
Well, I had to throw it back, so.
Okay.
So the freezer.
It was too small.
Y'all are talking about the heat. I'm down here in Houston off the Gulf, and it is hot and humid.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. When you moved back.
Did. I chose this.
You did. And Jesus sent you there.
Jesus sent us home.
I have to say Jesus sent me home, but it was not to the Gulf Coast. So today this is episode 101. This is the kind of our wrap to our celebration of hitting the 100 episode marker. You've already heard the voices from the past. We brought back to celebrate for these two episodes with Todd and I, the original host of the podcast. That would be Taylor.
Yo.
Choate. Yeah, and he is not wearing a Sagu shirt.
Sagu. Officially, I am no longer on the alumni board. My term was done. And I'm finished with my master's, so I'm not in school anymore. So now I'm looking for my next university. So if you want to sponsor me, I will. If you're a university president out there, I'll gladly.
He's no longer a slave.
Oh, this is like a family reunion, man. This is so much fun. And then we have the man who spent hours not just behind the camera and behind the microphone, but also editing and uploading and doing all those things. So it's good to have Marco Echartea out in front being a part of this.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm happy to be back, and I'm still grimacing at the production, errors here, but, hey, it's good.
Hey, I got a question for Marco.
Yeah.
Marco, how would you like to be producing 2 episodes a week now?
I don't think you could pay me enough, but, hey.
Well, some things have gotten simpler. We've also crossed some other milestones recently as the podcast ramping up. We crossed 500 downloads a month.
Twice. Yeah, that's awesome.
So
praise God.
So good.
Kudos.
Someone's listening. We're not alone in the closet by ourselves.
So we're.
Does that mean I can quit pushing download 100 times now?
That's good.
Shh, don't tell everybody the secret. Yeah. So anyway, so we're celebrating because one of the things, pastors, if you're listening, this isn't just a celebration, but it is a fact that we actually did, was it with Taylor, when you were on the podcast, we did a couple of episodes on the fact that the Bible actually teaches us to celebrate, and most pastors and most churches aren't good at it. Yep. So we're celebrating, and so one of the things that we talked about in celebration is you got to celebrate the right things. So last time we kind of celebrated, we talked about what were our favorite moments. And one of the things that of course I keep my notes, but maybe there was a favorite thing that God said to you, or that one of our, that was said in the podcast by a guest, a quote, a moment where there was a transformation, because we want to celebrate transformational things. So what was a transformational moment or a quote that you go, that was just so strong that it still sticks with me today? I know I got deep fast on this one, but I got something on my heart after that interlude where we're going to talk about in a minute. Anybody want to go?
I'm having to filter through the files because it's funny, Tim. I've found that we record so many episodes that some of my staff will come up to me and talk to me about the episodes, and I don't even remember what they were about because we record so many.
Well, I'll start because during COVID, we produced a lot of episodes, and we had a sociologist from Abilene Christian University on, and she's been back with us. She made a couple of statements when we were talking about the harvest in this season that I thought were so powerful. One is, she says that the younger generations, you millennials and Gen Z, are more vulnerable to hypocrisy than previous generations.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I have come back to that thought so often, even when I prepare sermons, when I'm preaching now, or when I'm going to be talking, if I'm going to be talking to a younger audience, I think about that statement. Because it was something that I'd never heard anybody really say so succinctly. And Taylor's now, I could see, he got that look on his face, Marco. He got his eyes up, he's processing.
Yeah.
And the junior high teacher.
Whew.
Whew.
Yeah. I think for me, my favorite, let me rephrase it. The thing that stuck to me the most are really kind of two things, and they're really not connected. The first one, we mentioned Josh Lewis in the last podcast about social media, and for me, man, I just feel like I've been through this transformation, reformation the last couple of years, and the podcast definitely helped with that. It really was a front for my open thinking and open dialogue. But Josh's conversation about social media, the usage, knowing your audience. When I transitioned, when we moved from Austin back home to the Houston area, I was going through files and throwing things away that I didn't need, scanning documents that I wanted to keep but didn't want to have to physically keep. But I had my notes. I ripped those notes from that day with Josh Lewis. I wrote in red pen. I had 3 pages of notes that day. I ripped them out of my journal and stuck them in a binder. And those notes today are back in a binder that, because those are just so practical and useful, and knowing your audience, speaking to your audience, gearing things around you, and just being comfortable with your audience. That, to me, that was really somebody saying, hey, it's okay to have a voice to your audience, was just powerful for me. Because it was also during a time that I felt like the Lord was telling me to use social media as a tool and not just as a whiteboard for thoughts, right? So I've really tried to scale back. I post a lot about my baby girl because that's my world, part of my world right now. But that was really helpful. The other thing for me that was most impactful was the big picture of the harvest. the conversations that Tim used that word a lot, the harvest, being harvest focused, a phrase I'd not really ever heard before until sitting with Tim a lot. And it really shaped my thinking on what is the Great Commission. And I've used this phrase a couple of times just with my own self. And this is just a Taylor for me. Okay, this is just for me. Is I don't want to be about come and see. And I know Jesus taught, there's times in the Bible where Jesus said come and see, or people in the Bible use that phrase, come and see what the Lord's done, or come and see what he did in my life, or come and see him. But for me, out of this conversation about the harvest has been go and tell, go and tell, go and tell. And, you know, like Tim mentioned a minute ago, I'm a junior high teacher now. My world is totally different today than it was 2 years ago when we started the podcast. But I can tell you this go and tell, and especially in the generation that we have now, is so important to go and tell. And so for me, just every conversation we had about the harvest, being harvest focused, the language that we use, the analogies that we used, how we present the gospel, for me has been so powerful that I reflect back on often from the podcast.
It's interesting you use that phrase. Todd, you may remember it was just a few weeks ago. For those who are of you listeners, you heard I said that one of the things that COVID has revealed about the church is that we've been more concerned about come and see than go and tell.
Yep. Yeah.
That we've become more of that we've been more focused on making sure we were back together than emphasizing the gospel component.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of jumps off where, you know, kind of my biggest memory, you know, I got to sit literally in this seat I'm sitting in during the entire coronavirus and do however many episodes we did on Corona. And what was most impactful for me during my time at the podcast is sitting here doing the podcast, talking through things, because I'm a verbal processor. So for those of you that don't know, verbal processors, we have to say things out loud before we really understand what we're talking about. And so for me, having all the guests on during Corona and being able to talk through what was going on during Corona, that helped me a ton as a pastor, just being able to sit here. So, you know, I would say that I'm thankful for the podcast, because if I was not able to sit and do 100 episodes during Corona, you know, it wouldn't have helped me to process what was going on and how to best attack it as a leader. So it's not necessarily one thing, but the whole of the Corona really helped me a lot to be able to just sit and talk with people that knew what they were talking about.
Yeah. Marco, is there something that just kind of grabbed you along the way like that?
Yeah, I feel like it was, you know, every episode, I felt like something, you know, just really stood out. And there are a number of things that were applicable to my life. I remember one of the things we've been talking about, Josh, and not intentionally, it's just one of the ways that, like I said, I really enjoyed his word pictures, that he talked about the gospel being powerful and effective. And that if there are people leaving your church or people not coming or not responding, it's not because that the gospel, you know, doesn't have power, because we know that it does, but it's something that you're doing with it. And it was just personally convicting. And the other underlying thing that I really feel like about the harvest, like Taylor was saying, I felt like ministry has been a part of my life. I was born and raised in the same church for 33 years. But the thing is, all my friends became believers, you know, and so I didn't have a personal evangelism in place. And we were just talking right before this, it's something that I've carried with me. How can I, because I'm a homebody, I spend my time in front of the screen editing and doing video and things. And now I have a ministry inside the church, but I constantly am thinking how, because I don't go anywhere, how do I, you know, develop personal evangelism and you know, really focus on the harvest and be intentional about it. And so just recently I got mentioned, been able to reach out to my neighbor who, you know, after a couple of weeks finally responded. And, you know, I was really excited to share that with Tim, because it's something that I've been thinking about since, you know, I've been a part of the podcast. And so it was really personally convicting to me.
You know, I remember sitting with you, Taylor. One of the things that we said before we started recording, I said was, I want there to always be a harvest component. And in those early days, we were putting out one episode every other week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, it was one episode every other week, and we still talk about the harvest. As a matter of fact, sometimes Todd even says, I said, you know where we're going to go with this topic? He said, you're going to go to the harvest. That's where you always go. And it is, I don't know if this is a good word, but it is an obsession. We still talk about the harvest. One of the, if you go back and listen to our COVID episodes, I said from day one, people are going to be worried about how do we get the church back together, and we're going to take this podcast and we're going to talk about how do we reach the harvest in this, because the church's natural tendency is going to be to pull in, and we've got to help push out. Funny, unique God moment. So in between episodes, we take a break. There was a guy came up there where Taylor's at, who used to work for me when I was in the secular world in construction, and he's been a follower of Jesus now for 9 years, but I probably haven't seen him for 15. Well, I guess I saw him I have seen him once since he came to faith. But before that, I hadn't seen him for it's been a long time since we spent any time together, since he worked for me. And I had forgotten. But these guys got to hear it as he sat there and talked about the day that he walked into my office, and I had called him into the office now, and I was weeping, and I said, I'm worried about your soul. I'm worried about your eternity. We're still passionate about the harvest here.
Yeah.
We're still passionate about the harvest. What was our first? I think it was like our second or third episode. We did the 11:30 challenge.
Right.
You remember?
Yeah.
Yes.
We haven't talked about that again, but interestingly, my mother-in-law does the 11:30 challenge right now still. Amen. She told me the other day, every day at 11:30, my alarm goes off, and this is who I'm praying for to get saved. Boom, boom, boom. Praying for to come to faith.
So cool.
Yeah. So, the harvest is still a radical focus, and I think sometimes it catches some of our guests, because I'll prime them, and they want to talk about this, they want to talk about their topic, but I always turn it back.
Oh, always.
Well,
always.
It's, if we're going to be on mission, if we're going to be on the mission that Jesus put us on, then that's kind of I think that's what you were saying, Taylor, and even Marco, is that having been in church, it sometimes feels like church becomes what's important and not the mission, not the eternal component.
Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Timware has been a huge benefit and blessing to me personally, as well as to my church. When Tim and I first connected in a coaching setting, my church was running in the 130 range. We now run 260, plus we have a really strong online audience. We went through a process of rebranding and changing our name, focusing on our vision, and shifting our culture in a lot of arenas. Tim was invaluable to talk us through that. He came out and met with our team. He was a huge, huge blessing. I highly, highly recommend Advancement.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
Tim, you just said a statement that I don't know that I've ever heard anyone state it this way. You said that God's obsessed with the harvest. And that's so true, or what you said was that the podcast was obsessed with the harvest. That in the early days, that's what we're talking. And the phrase hit me, that God's obsessed with the harvest, and that it is important for us to remember, no matter what pandemic or natural disaster that we're going through as a local body, that there's still an element that the harvest is always at the focus, always a focal point of not only the gospel, but God's heart.
Well, I recently was in studying. All of us are familiar with 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord's not slacking His promises, as some consider slow or slowness, slackness, whatever version you're in. It says, but He's patient, not wanting anyone to go to hell, but all to come to salvation. Not wanting any to die, but all to come to salvation. And when you think about the context of that passage in the context of the New Testament and things, that the only reason that He's held back Jesus' return is not because of the church, it's because of the harvest.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to use the word obsession, that's a pretty good word right there, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
What's that Bible verse that all might be saved? It's escaping me right now, but
yeah.
I'm sure you theologians know it in
Come
context.
on, Pastor.
Yeah.
Actually, I just gave it to you.
I'm just a junior high teacher now.
With a master's degree from Southwestern Assemblies of God University. But it's 2 Peter 3:9. That's what that's the one I just quoted. What were you going to say, Marco?
I just going back to it's a conversation we had in the first set of recordings that we did in that tiny room. And I'll just point out before I say this, Taylor, just with the lighting, the way you look, it looks like you're green screen in front of Starbucks right now. The light is just separated just right.
No, I'm physically here.
We can hear the highway. Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway.
You heard the producer reading. You're in a green screen. I hear the highway. It's still. I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. I've got a stress ball under the table. Okay. No, I was just thinking about those early days. Right, we were in that tiny room. And we talked about the not scene changes, the wardrobe changes. We actually had, we were changing shirts in between episodes to make it look fresh. And one of the things that we were talking about is when you were talking about who ministers are without their ministry. Who are they on a personal level? I likened it to Tony Stark talking to Captain America and the Avengers. And he was saying to Tony, who are you without the suit, And it made me think personally, the evangelism, the harvest, who, as a pastor, who am I without this ministry? And am I, living this lifestyle outside of the 4 walls that I'm ministering in? And that was a personal conviction very early on. And again, it's still translating to, an everyday type of thing that I'm trying to walk out.
Well, actually, a lot of people don't know this. Before we started the podcast, I went out on Facebook and I did on social media, I should say, not just Facebook. And I said, hey, we're looking at starting a podcast. What are some topics you want to hear? And I got a full list from a guy who I went to high school with, who doesn't know Jesus, who's, self-proclaimed atheist. And we used his list multiple times, the topics that he put out there. And actually, if he listens sometimes because, he knows that I'm praying for him. And a cool thing is that pre-podcast social media post has developed to a place where he and I talk almost weekly now. And we're on a journey together, and it's kind of cool. We've talked about the Bible now. I've shared scripture with him. He's talked about, well, I want to go read that. I want to get my Bible. I actually have a Bible, Tim. I want to go read that and see. It's the harvest is ripe around us, and I think what's cool, Taylor and Marco, that does thrill me that you reach there and you talk about your neighbor. You finally had a breakthrough with him. Taylor having moments in a school to start being the light. And, these moments that are tough for pastors to see. I think one of the hardest things that pastors go through is when you're full-time in ministry and all you do as the church and your staff, being a personal witness becomes a discipline. It is a discipline. Well, Taylor, I mean, when you were there in Austin, before you, I mean, we saw you talked about on the podcast that you guys met somebody and they came to faith through the dog park, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about them, Tim and Belisi.
Yeah.
Yeah, they that was right around the time of the 11:30 challenge, and still, they came to church, they came to faith, they got plugged in, they ended up started attending a church they had used to attend years back as little kids. But yeah, I was thinking when you were talking, Marco, about that personal evangelism piece, I was thinking about them, and then even now just the opportunity to be an evangelist, but in a practical, maybe not. We have all this jargon, right, in the church world for different ministries or different giftings, but really, like, I've just kind of had this redefinition in my mind of, man, I'm just being a disciple of Christ. If He's done it in my life, I ought to want to share it with others, or people who are seeking, people who don't know they're lost, people, and it's been an interesting season to come out of, Tim, like what you're saying. When you've been in full-time ministry, it's really easy. Let me put it like this for me, because I don't ever want to just assume that what I'm going through, someone else is going through in their own walk and convictions. But for me, it became a uniform that I put on every day to go into the office, to be a minister. But now my uniform is different. I'm a junior high math teacher. But I'm actually getting to walk out my faith every day that I walk on campus, to where, here's what's so cool. It's not only am I looking for opportunities now in a different light, because those aren't just provided for me. They're not, I don't walk onto that campus and immediately everyone's attention turns and goes, that's Pastor Taylor. I walk on that campus of 150 other staff members, and I'm just one of many. But the Lord is opening doors that I would have never been able to open and never had an opportunity to as a full-time pastor, to where, teachers come in my room. And just this last week, as a teacher came in and said, hey, something tells me that you can help me with this area of my life. And we, for about an hour and a half before school started, which is early, by the way, junior high in our town starts early. We got to sit and talk about just faith and life and things like that. And so tying it back to the harvest piece, I'm getting to focus on the harvest in a way that I've never, right or wrong, good or bad, I've never had an intention to focus on it for. And it's part of the reason why I think God's allowed this season of transition to happen in our lives, because I know I'm a better pastor today because of what I'm walking through today with the harvest.
I think that's the part that I struggle with working with pastors. I mean, Todd went through, our relationship started with coaching and those things, and so many guys. And I think everybody who comes to work, I work with, I know a lot of them are shocked at how much all I talk about is, are you reaching people for Jesus? Most of the time our preaching, we know how to preach. We're just preaching the wrong things. We know we can lead a church good enough, but we can't lead them toward the harvest. And if you're listening, pastors, this isn't to be offensive, but this is just observation. I mean, the statistics bear out that well over 50% of all people that come to faith in America today do it in churches that are under 5 years old, because once you get established as a church, ministry becomes about the church. And to stay harvest focused, harvest attentive is the phrase that we like to use here on the podcast. To stay that is a discipline. I actually had a conversation. My mom doesn't listen, so I'm gonna throw her under the bus. With my mom about this recently, and she was talking about someone she knows, and she was talking about somebody she knows, And I just said, so why don't you see them come to Jesus? She said, well, I told them this and I told them that. And I'm like, that didn't sound like Jesus. That sounded like you. And then she called me back and she had written this letter. She said, I was going to send this letter to them. And I said, go ahead and send that. After she read it, I said, go ahead and send that letter if you want them to never talk to you again and feel condemned by the person who says, I love you because Jesus loves you. But when we stay isolated from the harvest too long, the phrase that I have used again and again is that we fall in love with the idea of reaching the harvest, but we don't love the harvest enough to reach it. And so as a podcast for the next 100 episodes, you guys should know that if you're a listener, we're going to talk about the harvest. We're going to talk about it because that's what Jesus talks about. That's where he spent his days. Todd, you were quiet for this episode.
Well, I just letting you guys talk. I mean, it's one of those things. Sometimes me as a host, it's knowing my place, sometimes when it's good to get out of the way. And so letting you guys catch up, they get to hear me all the time. They miss Taylor and they miss Marco and,
They didn't miss, well, they probably missed the quality Marco produced. They didn't miss his face and his voice.
I miss Marco. How about that?
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Because now I'm trapped in a room alone with Tim.
But one day we'll have thousands of listeners and we'll have all this funding and we'll pay for, we'll say produced by, the man behind the screen, and we'll have, and this and that, and we'll do all those things. Hey, all right, Marco.
In the name of Jesus.
Yes.
Hey, Marco, have you noticed the little intros different too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. See, we're working on it. We're working on it.
Hey, I didn't say there weren't any improvements.
There weren't any. Hey, I want to say to all of you guys, to all three of you, that I feel honored that the Lord has used us together. I feel honored that you were willing to go on the journey and be a part of this. You follow what sometimes feels like a stupid thing, too much work. Rachel says, are you still doing that? You're going to do what on Saturday morning? You're going to record podcast? Yes, ma'am, we'll record podcast. And then I'm going to edit it and I'm going to upload it. I'm going to do the stuff.
Yeah.
And, but you guys, I think all the testimonies that come in about the podcast where God's using it, you guys are all a part of it. And as the visionary, as the leader here at Advancement, I want to say thank you and honor you guys. We would not be where we are. We could not do this, could not have done this without you. You guys are incredible. And I am thrilled at what God is continuing to do in your life. And Todd, we're going to look forward to the next 100 episodes, right?
Hey.
Yeah. It's gonna be great. God's up to something big. And I think, I don't want to downplay the first 100 episodes because I think God is using those to set us up for the next one. But I think God's got some big things for the future of the Advancement podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So we have to maintain our tradition, our thing, and we're going to go back to Marco again just because this is only the second time in front. No, we won't. We're going to go to Todd since he was quiet for most of this episode.
Ooh.
I just love you. I love to listen to you guys talk about, the harvest. It's, I feel like we sneak it in every episode some way, but I think it's for a purpose. I think really constantly we talk about that church as a whole will just, if we don't pay attention to it, we're always drawn inward. And the reason we talk about the harvest all the time is we have to be drawn outward.
Yes.
And that's what we as pastors have to be reminded all the time, that not to be inward focused, because no matter what we do, it will always draw us inward, and we have to focus on those that are out there that need Jesus every day.
Well, thank you guys. 101 podcasts in
Yes.
books. Woo! Yes.
All right.
All right. So we'll see everybody else again on the
Advancement Podcast.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.